They slammed her into the wall and laughed while she caught herself against the concrete. No one apologized, just the sound of boots grinding over gravel and their voices trailing off like it never happened. To them, she was a nobody, some random contractor, maybe logistics, maybe just lost. What they didn't realize was that she wasn't just Navy. She was the Admiral of the SEALs. Before we show you how Admiral Nora Keaton turned a training complex into a lesson in humility, make sure you're subscribed to Major Tom's Tales, hit that bell icon, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because this isn't just a story about disrespect. It's about the moment an entire base learned they'd pushed the wrong person. The rain had stopped barely 10 minutes earlier, but the sky still carried bruises of storm clouds, and the wind off the Pacific smelled of salt and diesel. Admiral Nora Keaton walked across the gravel lot outside Atlantic Training Complex 3, dressed in nothing that hinted at her rank. No medals, no ribbons, no polished brass, just a plain Navy windbreaker zipped halfway up, dark slacks that had seen better days, and a slim briefcase that could have held anything. She moved like someone with nothing left to prove. Shoulders easy, spine straight, eyes sharp, scanning not for threats but for patterns. Which antenna was offline? Which Humvee's taillight was cracked? Which guard had his boots laced wrong? To the two young Marines at the checkpoint, she barely existed. The shorter one, maybe 23, squinted as she approached. "Ma'am, this is a restricted zone. Contractors check in through logistics." Nora didn't blink. "I'm expected." The second Marine, a year older and a touch more assertive, leaned forward. "No one's listed under your name, ma'am. You got papers?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope stamped with a secure code. No name, just clearance digits that meant nothing unless you knew how to read them. The younger Marine glanced at the code and hesitated, suddenly unsure. "All right, I'll call it in," the Marine muttered, fumbling with his radio. Nora waited, didn't tap her foot, didn't glance at her watch, just stood quietly while the wind tugged at the corners of her windbreaker and the guard struggled with static. Her gaze drifted past the tower, beyond the mess hall chimney puffing white steam into the cool air, toward the barracks where laughter echoed. Young, cocky voices, tossing jokes about busted ropes and endless cardio. She didn't smile. By the time she reached the operations building, not a single person on base had registered her presence. The front hallway reeked of machine oil and fresh paint, half discipline, half construction site. Footsteps echoed overhead, but no one stopped her. Behind a terminal near the entryway, a logistics clerk barely looked up. "Ma'am, contractors check in downstairs." Nora's tone was calm, steady. "I'm not a contractor." The clerk started to argue, then froze when he noticed the coded seal stamped on the folder she'd placed in front of him. She didn't explain, just walked on. At the corridor's end, muffled voices leaked through a closed door. Officers mid-briefing, debating terrain maps and weather windows for the next joint SEAL Marine operation. A major, 2 captains, 3 lieutenants, none of them aware she was standing just outside. She listened, pushed the drop zone back another 2 clicks, weather windows closing. "Can't," someone shot back. "Convoy route's already locked. Move the LZ and we'll have Marines hauling gear through unmapped ground." "Then remap it." "With what time? Exercise kicks off at 0500. Silence. Then a quieter voice offered. "It's a training op. If things go sideways, we adjust in real time." Nora's jaw tightened. That was exactly the problem. The point of training was to make sure you didn't have to adjust when it got real. But she didn't step in, not yet. She waited by the door, still and silent. That's when it happened. A cluster of Marine NCOs came clattering down the stairwell behind her, young, loud, full of swagger. One of them shouldered past Nora without warning, hitting her hard enough that her palm slapped the wall to keep balance. "Watch it," he muttered, eyes already fixed ahead. Another snorted. "Careful, Grandma, walls don't move." Nora didn't react. She simply watched them disappear down the hallway, boots echoing off tile until their laughter faded into silence. Then her eyes shifted to the framed tactical chart near the door. 3 mistakes. 2 would be fatal in the field. 1 was a logistical flaw big enough to stall an entire convoy. She studied it quietly and waited. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice came from a lieutenant stepping out of the operations room. Early 30s, clean shave, overconfident cologne. He glanced at her like she was a misplaced clipboard, then looked past her, already dismissing her presence. "We're in the middle of a classified brief. If you're meeting with Commander Rogan, you'll need to wait here." Nora gave a small nod and stepped aside. The hallway was narrow. Pale concrete, scuffed wax floors. The marks of rifles leaned too long against the wall. She stood still, hands loose at her sides, as 2 more officers walked by without acknowledgement. Inside, the briefing droned on. Someone yelling through a broken speaker, words about supply delays, GPS drift, NATO protocols. Half of it distorted, half careless. None of them had caught the error on that chart outside. She was certain of it. Then came footsteps again. The same NCOs, 3 this time. The one who'd shoved her earlier grinned wide. "You still hanging around? Didn't think contractors were allowed near op rooms." "I'm not a contractor," Nora replied evenly. "Sure you're not," he smirked. The others chuckled behind him, not cruelly, just with that easy arrogance of men who'd never been humbled. One brushed past her again, deliberately this time, his shoulder grazing hers. She didn't move, didn't blink, only shifted her left foot half an inch. A subtle stance adjustment no one noticed, except maybe another SEAL. The last one tossed a parting comment over his shoulder, tone dripping with mockery. "Try not to lean too hard next time, Grandma. These walls are load-bearing." Their laughter faded down the hall, echoing like smoke in the still air. Nora turned her head slightly, eyes flicking back to the tactical chart beside the door. The blue convoy line twisted through a mountain pass that didn't exist. The coordinates were off by 2 degrees, enough to send a whole squad into the wrong valley under fog, enough to get people killed. She tilted her head. In the legend box, a small transposed number, 7401, an error that slipped past drafts and digital edits, the kind only someone who'd walked that terrain would notice. She didn't correct it, not yet. Instead, she stepped away from the wall and leaned casually against the opposite side, posture relaxed but eyes alert. She was watching now, listening, reading the room, calculating, and not one man on that base had a clue who they'd just brushed by. When Nora stepped back outside, sunlight had finally broken through the clouds. The air carried dust, oil, and burnt rubber, the usual scent of a base, but beneath it she caught something else. Chalk and sweat. Training mats. Off to her left, beyond the vehicle bay, a crowd of recruits gathered around a sparring ring. Canvas mats spread over hard-packed dirt, enclosed by chain-link fencing on 3 sides, and on the 4th, a bare concrete wall. No medics, no gear checks, just testosterone and time to kill. She started toward the gate, intending to slip away quietly, until she heard a familiar voice. "Hey, look who's still hanging around." The same NCO from earlier leaned against the gatepost, sweat soaking his shirt, gloves draped over his shoulder, grin wide. "You sightseeing, ma'am? Lost?" Nora stayed silent. Another voice chimed in, teasing. Maybe she wants to join in. She's been lurking all day, another added. Come on, let her in. See if she can swing without her paperwork. Laughter rippled through the circle. Careless, not cruel. Just the reckless noise of young men who'd never been tested. Before she could turn to leave, one of them yanked the gate open. Come on, just one round, he said, smirking. No contact if you don't want it. Think of it as base hospitality. Nora paused, eyes sweeping the group in a quick, practiced scan. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet calculation. Nora scanned the group, 6 Marines, 3 SEAL candidates lingering near the fence. The loudest NCO was favoring his right leg, old knee injury, likely from overtraining. The one beside him had taped knuckles and leaned too far forward. A brawler, not a technician. The third one's eyes were different. Steady, observant. He wasn't mocking her, he was studying her. That one had seen real combat. She noted the exits, the bare wall behind her, the direction of the sun, and exactly how many would step in if this escalated past a joke. Then she stepped through the gate. Gasps and low whistles rippled through the crowd. A few recruits half lifted their phones, part curiosity, part mischief. All right, the loud NCO said, grinning and raising his hands like a showman. We got ourselves a volunteer. Or, did you just wander in, ma'am? He nodded toward her jacket. You can take that off if it slows you down. Nora didn't move. Fine, he said with a chuckle. Let's make it simple. Just a push test. He stepped forward, light on his feet, making it look playful. Then, suddenly, shoved her square in the chest with both hands. She staggered back 2 steps. Her shoulders smacked the concrete wall behind the mats with a deep, hollow thud. Laughter erupted. Damn, didn't mean to hit that hard. She's still standing, though, one of them called out, pretending concern. You good, ma'am? Another added. Nora straightened her posture, brushed the dust from her sleeve, and said nothing. Her face was calm. No pain, no anger, just a shift in her eyes. Cold focus, like a sniper adjusting windage before the shot. The NCO's grin faltered for the first time. Still, no one there had the slightest clue who she really was. All right, he laughed again, wiping his palms on his cargo pants. Guess the wall wins round 1. The others chuckled. Someone tossed him a pair of gloves, but he didn't bother putting them on. Just rolled his shoulders and circled her, hands loose, stance like a street boxer. You don't have to stay in here, he said casually. But if you do, better learn to move those feet. Nora stayed still. The circle tightened. Phones hovering, expecting another cheap laugh before lunch. The NCO jabbed forward, a soft tap, open palm, telegraphed and harmless. He was testing her nerves. She didn't flinch. He tried again, feint left, lunge right, more speed this time, enough to make most people stumble. She didn't. Instead, Nora's right hand snapped forward, catching his wrist mid-strike. With a sharp twist and a step inward, she redirected his momentum, and in one fluid motion, dropped him flat on his back with a clean arm drag. No wasted effort, no showmanship, just precision. One moment he was upright, the next he was pinned beneath her knee, breath knocked out, eyes wide. The yard went dead silent. She rose without a word, smooth and composed, like she was sliding a blade back into its sheath. From the back of the circle, a dark-haired SEAL candidate, maybe 26, leaned toward his buddy, whispering something low. His gaze stayed on Nora, focused, uneasy. He'd seen that move before in another training yard, under a different instructor. He just couldn't recall where. The other NCOs shifted, glancing at one another. "Okay," one said, forcing a laugh. "Lucky grab." A heavier Marine stepped forward, thick forearms, barfighter jawline, grin wide. "My turn," he said, rolling his shoulders like he was stepping into a ring. Nora didn't resist. He came in faster, arms up, trying to overpower her. She slipped sideways, using his weight against him, guiding him past her shoulder, then clipped the back of his knee mid-turn. He dropped, one leg folding under him. Before he could react, she pivoted behind him and locked his arm in a standing hold. Tight, clean, painful. He tapped the air, instinctively conceding. She released him instantly. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Phones lowered. A few SEAL candidates straightened, recognizing something they couldn't quite name. Nora finally spoke, voice calm and quiet. "You really don't know who you're pushing." No one replied. The first NCO stumbled up, rubbing his elbow, his voice smaller now. "What are you, former spec ops or something?" Her eyes flicked toward him. Just a second, no more, and that second was enough. He looked away. They still didn't understand. They guessed veteran, maybe ex-SEAL, maybe some retired combat trainer drifting through the base. But the truth was standing 10 feet away, pulse steady, already calculating how many of these men would fall under her next command. This wasn't revenge, it was a warning. Then a metallic door slammed, the sound slicing through the murmurs like a rifle crack. "Stand down!" The voice wasn't shouted, but it carried a weight that froze the yard. Commander Rogan crossed the gravel with crisp boots and a jaw set like stone. Commander Rogan's eyes swept across the crowd of recruits before locking onto the two NCOs still trying to catch their breath. "What the hell is going on here?" one of them stammered. "Sir, just a quick sparring drill and she volunteered," the other cut in hastily, gesturing toward Nora. "Didn't say who she was, sir. We figured she was logistics." Rogan's brow narrowed. "Who?" Nora turned slowly to face him. She hadn't moved from the mat. Her windbreaker was still zipped, her posture unchanged. Calm, still, unreadable. No dust on her slacks, no sweat on her brow. Just poise. "Keaton," she said, her voice even. The name lingered for a moment in the air. Rogan's eyebrow twitched. "Keaton?" he repeated, slower this time. "And you're first." "Nora." A pause followed, one that seemed to stretch forever. Then something clicked behind his eyes. His jaw tightened, his expression sharpened. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. A flash of recognition crossed his face. "Wait here," he ordered abruptly. He turned on his heel and strode toward the operations building, muttering something low to the aide hustling beside him. The metal door slammed shut behind them. For a few moments, no one breathed. Nora turned her head, calmly surveying the mat enclosure. The same NCOs now stood a few paces back, one nervously adjusting his gloves, the other staring at the dirt as though it might swallow him. Then the aide reappeared, running this time. In one hand, he clutched a red-sealed folder. In the other, a satellite radio spitting scrambled confirmation codes. He passed the folder to Rogan, who tore it open, eyes flicking across the first line before freezing mid-breath. Printed inside, ADM Nora Keaton, Kavna Command Group, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. Rogan's spine straightened, his chest tightened. He exhaled sharply, stepped back outside, and stopped at the edge of the mat. His gaze locked on her as if seeing her for the first time. "Admiral on deck." The words hit the air like a hammer. The entire yard fell silent. Boots snapped together. Phones vanished. Shoulders squared. It didn't matter that half of them had no idea what Kavna Command Group meant. Admiral was all they needed to hear. The word Admiral hit like a shockwave through their lungs. Even the arrogant NCO who'd shoved her stepped into parade rest before he realized he was doing it. Face pale, Nora stood still. She hadn't asked for recognition. She hadn't demanded a title. But now that it had arrived, sudden, unspoken, and heavy, it filled the air like gravity itself. For 10 long seconds, the yard stayed frozen in silence. Then she spoke. "Now that you're listening," Nora said, her voice calm but unshakably commanding, "let me be very clear." She stepped off the mat. Not in anger, not in triumph, but with total control. Every motion was precise, every pause intentional. She could have shouted, named names, demanded consequences, but she didn't need volume. She had authority. "I didn't come here for ceremony," she continued evenly, "and I didn't come here to be saluted." The words sank deep into the stunned quiet. Commander Rogan now stood beside her, posture stiff as rebar, the red-sealed folder clutched in his hands like it could explain the last half hour. "I came unannounced," Nora said, "because I've reviewed 27 readiness reports in the last 6 months, and your base had 3 inconsistencies in protocol execution, perimeter control, and NCO evaluation." Her gaze shifted toward the very men who'd shoved her into the wall. "So I decided to see for myself." There was no venom in her tone. She didn't need it. The silence did the work for her. "You didn't recognize me, and that's fine. I'm not in uniform. I wore this jacket on purpose." She tugged lightly at the edge of her windbreaker. No medals, no stripes, just another pair of boots on the gravel. She turned toward the line of SEAL candidates and Marines, their earlier swagger replaced by pale faces and rigid posture. "But here's what isn't fine," she said, her tone sharpening. "The second you thought someone didn't matter, you stopped being soldiers." The air went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Some of you saw an older woman and decided she didn't belong. Some of you saw civilian clothes and forgot your core principle, respect without condition. And a few of you," her eyes locked briefly on the first NCO, "thought it'd be funny to push someone who wouldn't push back." She stepped into the center of the mat again. "Let me correct that assumption." Her eyes swept the yard, voice steady as steel. "My name is Admiral Nora Keaton. I command Naval Special Warfare. Every SEAL team, every DevGru operator, every SWCC, NSWAG, and every classified reconnaissance unit under the United States Navy." The weight of her words hung in the air. "And if I hadn't been who I am, if I were just a liaison, a trainer, or even someone's mother walking through this yard, what would you have done differently?" Silence. No one spoke. She gave them the dignity of that silence, letting the question crush their pride all on its own. Then she nodded once to Rogan, whose face looked 10 years older than it had 5 minutes ago. "Commander," she said quietly, "assemble your recruits." "Ma'am," he answered, already turning. "We're not done yet." Nora's voice cut through the stillness like a blade drawn in slow motion. The yard went utterly silent, save for the faint tug of wind rattling the chain-link fence. Commander Rogan gave a tight nod, then barked with crisp precision. "Formation! Dress and cover! Move!" Boots scuffed dust into shallow clouds as recruits scrambled into line. Rows straightened, chins lifted. No one dared shift or speak. Even the cocky NCOs from 10 minutes ago now stood stiff and pale, eyes fixed dead ahead, jaws locked. Admiral Nora Keaton walked to the front of the formation. No podium, no platform, just a slight rise in the gravel beneath her boots. She didn't need volume, her presence did the work. I've served in the Navy for 33 years, she began, tone steady, deliberate. 22 of those with units that officially don't exist. Her eyes swept the line, sharp and unflinching. I've led men and women whose names you'll never read, in countries that deny we were ever there. The air thickened. I've bled in the Pacific, crawled through caves in the Hindu Kush, sat in Langley briefing rooms while drones circled targets I knew wouldn't see sunrise. She took one slow step forward. And I've buried more sailors and Marines than I care to count. Brave, skilled, promising. Lost not to enemy fire, but to ego. Her gaze drifted to the front row, the same NCO who had shoved her earlier. He stared forward, sweat darkening his collar. "You think your enemy's out there?" she said quietly, motioning toward the distant horizon. "Sometimes. It's the voice in your head telling you someone doesn't matter." She paused, not for drama, but because the silence carried the truth better than words. That voice makes you careless, makes you arrogant, makes you shove someone because you think they won't fight back. She let the line breathe, her tone unchanging. I've seen what that mindset costs. I've had to explain it to mothers who will never see their sons again. I've had to sign letters that ended careers before they began. She took another step closer to the line. Unlike a battlefield, this was a test, and you failed. No shouting, no fury, just precision and truth. She turned slightly toward Rogan. "Effective immediately. Those responsible for the incident are to be reassigned." The commander's nod was sharp, his hand already reaching for his notepad. Nora faced the formation again. "You'll report to Remedial Field Instruction, Week 0 format, under my direct supervision. You'll train until you learn to see weakness in yourself before pointing it out in someone else. And when I say jump, you'll ask not who's watching, but how far's the blast radius?" A ripple moved through the ranks, muted, uneasy, but no one dared speak. She took one last measured step back, folded her hands behind her, and laid it out plain. "If you're wearing the uniform just to post about it, go, now. If you want to build something that survives in the dark, congratulations. You're enrolled in the only course that matters." The commander barked the unit to attention. Boots hit gravel in perfect rhythm. But Nora wasn't watching them anymore. She was looking through them, past the yard, at the institution they all claimed to serve. The commander's office felt too warm, not from heat, but from that prickly discomfort pride meets when embarrassed. Commander Rogan stood behind his desk, arms stiff. The aide lingered in a corner, nervously pretending to tidy a folder. Admiral Nora Keaton moved to the wall and stood in front of the same tactical chart. Faded laminate, the same blue route snaking through a mountain range that only existed on paper. She traced the line with a gloved fingertip and asked quietly, "Who drew this?" Rogan cleared his throat. "Captain Harlan. He handles logistics between our SEAL detachment and the Marine Training Unit. It was reviewed before posting, ma'am." He hesitated. "I believe so." Nora nodded once, dug a grease pencil from her windbreaker lining, and circled a section near the top, then another, marking a shallow triangle near the lower left. "Right here," she said. "You've marked an elevation gain of 1,200 feet over 2 clicks. Fine until it rains." She tapped the bottom edge. "Then the whole approach becomes a slide. Your alternate route cuts straight through what used to be a controlled burn zone." Rogan frowned and stepped closer. "Are you sure that data was updated last quarter?" "It was," Nora said flatly, "from satellite. Not field verified," she added, circling another area. "And here, you've put a rally point inside a natural funnel, defensible on paper. But if your comms go down, as they will in that terrain, you've boxed in the element with one exit and no high ground." She tapped a third spot. This supply cache, placed near a water source. Smart, unless that source floods seasonally. I know, Nora said quietly, because I ran an op through this valley back in 2019. Lost 2 crates of medical supplies to runoff before we learned. She turned from the chart, her tone still even. Your people trust the terrain because it's printed on a wall, not because they've actually walked it. The aide had stopped fidgeting. Rogan's face had drained of color. Ma'am, he said, voice tight, I take full responsibility for the oversight. Nora gave a single nod. Good, because you're going to fix it. He blinked, nodded. Of course. How soon? Before first light, she replied. Send your top 3 logistics officers to verify both primary and secondary egress routes. 1 SEAL, 1 Marine, 1 Intel liaison. No vehicles. I want boots on the ground and live comm checks. Yes, ma'am. She walked toward the window overlooking the training yard below. Recruits moved across the gravel, refilling canteens and sweeping up debris. The mat enclosure was empty now. The wall she'd been shoved into had returned to anonymity, just another slab of concrete. I didn't come here to humiliate your people, she said softly. Rogan stepped beside her. I know. I came because there's drift, she continued, between the field and the flag, between rank and reality. She turned to face him fully, and I needed to see where that gap begins. His eyes lowered. You've got good men, she said, but they're too comfortable. They don't fear being wrong, and that's how they'll lose the next fight before it even starts. She reached up, lifted the tactical chart off its hook, rolled it with one hand, and passed it to the aide. Burn it. The aide nodded, clutching it like classified contraband. Rogan exhaled, guilt heavy in his voice. Ma'am, I should have recognized you. Nora was already walking toward the door. No, she said, without looking back. You should have recognized what command looks like, whether it's wearing stars or not. And with that, she left. No salute, no ceremony, just silence, and the sound of institutional respect falling back into line behind her. By the time Admiral Nora Keaton stepped back into the training yard, the air had changed. No laughter, no side chatter, no swagger. The recruits stood taller now, not because anyone ordered them to, but because something in the gravel beneath their boots suddenly felt heavier. The same NCO who'd shoved her earlier stood at attention in the far corner, uniform perfectly squared, jaw tight, eyes locked forward. As she passed, he didn't say a word, but his salute, sharp, silent, and faster than regulation, said everything. Nora returned it with the faintest nod, then kept walking. She moved through the yard the same way she'd arrived, quiet, steady, no medals, no ribbons, no fanfare. But this time, not a single soul mistook her for anything less than what she was, the Admiral of the SEALs. What would you have done if you were one of those recruits? Do you think someone should have to prove their rank to earn your respect? Or should rank speak for itself? If this story hit the way it should, tap that like button, subscribe to Major Tom's Tales, and turn on the bell so you never miss when the uniform speaks louder than the noise. And if you know someone who thinks titles don't mean anything, send them this video. Your next mission's already waiting on the screen. Go watch it now. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, new story.